I wake up with Wittgenstein this morning, and I made the video last yesterday about the second sentence on Taoism, and I think the Wittgenstein's life work on his um, on his book of the tractatus. It is a vivid depiction of how we could run into such a circle of fallacy when we use a language trying to name what we think is the reality of the world. And well, by the end of the book, he would say, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one should be silent. It is, in a way, he reached to the heights of Lao Zhi, trying to ponder the question in Western philosophy. When we speak of something, how can we be sure what we speak of is the truth? We can't. It's in the Tao Te Ching. Lao Zhi said about 2,500 years ago, without others modern technology and modern science. He said, if you're trying to name what do you think is reality, you're creating the reality for you or for mankind. That is to say, we are here not because of we're part of the nature. We used to be part of nature when we did not, trying to name everything. The life itself should be nameless. The life itself, what we do, what we live, our living is nameless. Our interact with nature, that is nameless. Once we start to name it, we put our thoughts, our motivation into this definition, then you have created, invented a different reality according to our perception. That is what Winsberg trying to say. And it's been said in Tao Te Ching 2,500 years ago. See the relationship, see the difference between Western and the Eastern philosophy. It's still in the fundamentals. Western philosophy doesn't believe that you should sit there think about what is fundamental to humankind. And East philosophy would intuitively do the same thing. They would sit there literally think about what is fundamental and how we can go from the fundamental to practical. Where Western philosophy would go from practical, then at one point of day or one point of their lifetime, they would go back to the fundamental, say why we think the way we think. I think this is two different approach in life. To a Chinese philosopher, if they are great, if they are not uh, uh, um, being mixed up in the practical life, they are too greedy or they are too materialist. Um, they would, by definition, by the very nature of our education, the language itself, they would they would literally sit down, think of the fundamental first. If you write Chinese, if you appreciate the beauty of the character of Chinese, that whole experience compel you to do the meditation, to do the reflection. You would, after you write in Chinese, you would literally compelled, uh, uh, wanting to sit down to reflect on what does it all means. Well, the same question probably would be posed if you are a Western philosopher. You would say that if you say that Chinese as a language would, has been constituted differently from English as a Western language. Um, there's a it would be the same thing when you write down something, you are naming something. You see, you're fundamentally trying to put your thoughts, put your very definition into the way you trying to describe the word. Isn't that fundamentally the same as a language in English and as a language as Chinese? No. Till this day, Chinese remain a character that resemble what we see. You see, there's different layers of putting your um, motivation or your yourself inserting into this description of the world, or description of the reality. When you write in Chinese, you are doing the image of the reality, and when you write in English, you are abstracting what your thoughts into letters. So that letter, that thought, that name has nothing to do with the reality. It could be existed independently. That's the problem. Well, you would say that the way Chinese being written, you're trying to resemble the nature, resemble the nature. That would actually, by definition, you put you are sensible, your perception of sensible reality into Chinese character, and then that limits how you progress in life. That's exactly what happened um, when we took that approach for this 2,000 years, because we being limited by the way we perceive the nature. We think we are doing a copy of the nature. We think we're doing the very perception of the nature is more close to the nature, to the reality. But in fact, that's what we can perceive in Chinese. That limited Chinese philosophy progress. I would think that most culture who's doing the same way met the limitation one way or another, and that's in that sense was stagnated their progress. But somehow, some way, this approach still has meanings when you take different approach trying to insert mainly about what human race think of the nature in the first place. And then yeah, if you keep pushing this, eventually you reach to scientific uh, thoughts, but not before. It has to, well, the process of the human thoughts has to go through religions uh, first before you can reach scientific thoughts. So that's why you can see how Western progressed. Um, Once at one point of the time, there bound to be a religion that push this scientific method out, because as you plunged into reality, which is 3D world, our thoughts cannot extend our logic in the 3D world because we are not defined the way we are in 3D. Come to think of it, I would say that the next step for philosophy would be fundamentally go back to the originality of the reality, to think of what is the world in 3D. Because right now, fundamentally, it doesn't matter if you look at all aspects of the study we're doing right now, mathematics, geometric, um, logic, philosophy, even life itself, politicals. We really based our thoughts in 2D dimension. There's no 2D dimension. There's no 1D dimension. Can you describe something like this 1D dimension? Fundamentally, there's X and Y. There's naturally, it doesn't matter. Even it come to one atom of thickness. There, it is still 3D. Can you think that we are limited in the 3D world, but we are limiting ourselves with 2D thinking? That could probably be the problem. That's why there's so much conflict between emotions and scientific thoughts. If you take emotion as a complicated rational thoughts all mixed up together, sometimes you instinctively feel something is right or wrong. That's from your emotion. That feeling, that very feeling, is the compound rational thinking. If you really decipher the meaning of the emotions, you always come to some logic, reason, or cause or effect on that emotion. I think I stretch this too broad, but it come back to the fundamentals. So you can see that right now, Western philosophy is pushing ahead, but you still periodically find that some genius would come out to say that, wait a minute, what you're trying to say logically, like Russell's mathematic logic, it's fundamentally wrong because it's based on your perception, on humans' perception, not on what is true out there. We could, because of our perception, well, we want to seek that subjective, collective subjectivity, which we call objectivity. The really human race's objectivity is a collective subjectivity of human race. It is not reality. It's our reality. So the logic conclusion of our development, if we go along into more complex complexity of this logic reasoning, would be AI. Because upon layers of layers definition, upon layers of layers logic, we went beyond the capacity of the human mind. Then we reach to the point that we have to use machine to help us with the storage and process of the logic and our definition of the world. That by very definition is we are making copy of our reality. Not copy, not direct copy. We're making our copy, our perception. In this process of artificial intelligence, we literally take away part of our humanity. Because by doing so, we have to admit that everything said in scientific, unscientific data, the interpretation either has to be right or wrong. There's no debate on whether if this scientific data is a true reflection of the reality anymore. It's on us whether we agree if our interpretation, our imagination, our perception to us right or wrong. In this sense, we become stone. We become part of nature. So that is self-righteousness. And with that, you are subject to the attack from the nature because you try to become part of it. Naturally, our reality has to clash with nature's reality. That's when God show up to tell you if you get it right or wrong. So that's the fundamental difference.